Hello, my name is Anil Keswani and I teach in the Faculty of Finance at Cass Business School, and today I'd like to tell you about some of my recent research that is concerned with explaining the size of credit spreads on corporate bonds. The credit spread on corporate bonds is the yield difference between a corporate bond and an equivalent government bond. And generally speaking, the yield on corporate bonds is much larger than the yield on an equivalent government bond. Well, we might explain this difference by first thinking about taxes and liquidity. Owners of corporate bonds are liable to a greater burden of taxes than equivalent government bonds within the US. So taxes may partially explain this yield difference. In addition, corporate bonds are generally less liquid or less tradable than equivalent government bonds, and so this difference in liquidity may explain partially the yield difference. One other crucial reason why there is a yield difference between corporate and government bonds is that there is a higher risk of default on the corporate bonds than for the government bonds. Therefore, the bondholder needs to be compensated for this additional default or credit risk. So if we start off by simply measuring this credit risk using expected default losses, we can sum up expected default losses, taxes, and liquidity aspects and try and understand what the remainder of the spread is that is unexplained by these three factors. We might attribute the remainder of this spread to a credit risk premium. If we look at the size of the credit risk premium on corporate bonds, it's round about between 30 and 60% of credit spreads. It's pretty large. So the aim in our paper is to try and understand why this credit risk premium is so large and what risk factors actually explain its size. So we start off with a set of conventional risk factors such as market, size, and value factors, and we find that they don't do very well at explaining the level of credit spreads. Then we turn to more sophisticated risk factors, such as downside systematic risk or systematic skewness risk. And we also find that even for these more sophisticated risk factors, that these fail to explain the level of credit spreads. So then we turn and look to idiosyncratic risk factors. Idiosyncratic bond volatility works well in explaining the size of credit spreads because it captures the risks that investors face from changes in bond liquidity. Our second main result is to show that idiosyncratic bond value at risk works even better than idiosyncratic bond volatility at explaining the level of spreads. By idiosyncratic bond value at risk, we mean the risk of extreme downside losses that bond investors might face. Why are credit spreads so large? Why are credit risk premiums so large? So the main conclusion we draw from our paper is that this is the case because investors are extremely averse to the risk of large downside losses when they hold corporate bonds.